I will call to order the Jamaica Selectboard meeting for Monday, February 28th. And the first item is to ask the Selectboard if there's any additional items that have popped up to add to the agenda. All right, we will proceed as the agenda is. First item on the agenda is to approve the minutes from our last meeting, February 28th.
Move to approve the minutes of the meeting of February 28th.
Thank you.
Second.
Second, Andy, thank you. Any further discussion? Oh, looks good. All right, all in favor of approving the minutes from the 28th meeting, say aye.
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 Any opposed?
It's not really the 28th, that's tonight.
Are-
Oh, yeah.
No,
No,
I'm looking
sorry.
at yes, sorry.
Yeah, that's the typo.
There you have my typo, that's the 14th, today's the 28th.
Yes.
So a motion to approve the minutes from the February 14th Select Board meeting. From motion
Second.
by seconded. All in favor of approving the 14th minutes?
Aye.
Thank you, thanks, good catch. We always have to mess up something. Okay, the next item is to approve the warning for town meeting. And as everybody knows, we've moved the date of, well, hopefully everybody knows, to Saturday, April 2nd. And it will be held at 10 a.m. at the town garage.
I move that we approve the
Warning.
warning.
Okay.
I second.
Jessica seconds. Any discussion, Greg?
I just noticed in the article number 2, you say to review the town report.
Yes.
What we do is act on it. So I'm just curious, the use of the word review.
Yeah, that was a recommendation from our lawyer. He was looking at some other stuff, and that to act on it allows somebody to not approve it, so to speak, which is meaningless. We don't disapprove or approve the town report. So that's where he was.
It's like the delivery of the town
It's been
report to the
warned
town.
before the town meeting
Right.
approves, accepts the town report.
But his thinking, or what he said, and not to say that it was always right before, because it might not have been, but
Right.
if we don't accept it, that's meaningless, because it's a report, and we review what's in the report. Charlie, did you have something to add on that? Or?
Yeah, I think I understand where Greg's coming from, because
I do too, yeah.
I've been living here for a long time, Greg, and that's a holdover from the way in the past. It's been a very long habit of Jamaica to act on the report of the auditors. What
Right.
we today call the town report used to be the report of the auditors. And when we switched over to hiring a professional audit firm to review the work of our town treasurer, we stopped that whole legal business of acting on the report of the auditors. And the town report now is informational in nature, and it is not, in fact, it contains an audit report whenever one is done, but it is not the report of the auditors that we used to act on in the past. So I'm quite certain that what Greg is referring to is that our present-day town attorney has told the select board that acting on to approve or not approve the town report is a meaningless action, given that circumstances have changed and we changed the way we do our auditing.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's the only question I have is that under the term review, if somebody, and there are people in town who go through this thing with a fine tooth comb,
Absolutely.
finds an error.
But we can
Make it
note
so
of
within,
that error.
with that, okay.
Yeah,
It's just one article. Anyway,
Right,
but the whole town report may
Right.
have
Something in it.
something in it.
And I just want to provide people who
Right.
come in with a observation and you go, oh geez, yeah, you're right there, that they feel that they're being heard and they'll be included as an official
Yes.
addendum.
Right.
Yeah.
And to the extent there were anything that actually affected the finances
Mhm.
and how much was being approved,
that change because of Article 7
Mhm.
could actually be reflected, and then Article 7 would be revised to reflect with the change.
Good.
But yeah, Nick was right.
And I
It's
think
not-
from your
yeah.
perspective, running the meeting, so to speak, it still is an opportunity to open up dialogue.
Absolutely.
Right,
With-
and I just want to be clear where you're coming from so that I know how to direct traffic.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
That's all. Okay, thank you.
Okay, no, thank you. That's a good point because that is something that has changed. Good discussion. So the motion is there to approve.
Is there a motion?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yes,
was-
there's a motion.
Go ahead with that.
Oh, so there's a motion on the table, anything,
Second.
and it has been seconded. Any further
Further
discussion?
discussion?
All in favor of approving the warning for the April 2nd, 2022 town meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous approval. Thank you, thank you.
Can I ask a question about the warning?
Absolutely. Oh, yeah.
On Article 4, shall the town allocate the 25,000 to pursue hiring a town administrator? Are we going to explain all that day? There's going to be no description of that before the town meeting? I thought there was going to be.
Yeah, I still hope, and I know I'm very late to the, I am working on the letter from the select board that goes in, and I want everybody here to
Way.
have some weigh in on that.
Right,
That will
right.
go in the town report.
Because we can't put the information on the warning.
Right, and it
No,
will
I
be
mean-
something that we will be prepared to discuss at the meeting too. I'm
Right.
sure.
Right. Question comes
I
from-
want
I'm
it.
asking now, like,
Right.
what do you mean? What is it?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, I know Greg had suggested at one time possibly an informational meeting, but maybe if we see how people react to the information we're gonna send
Yeah.
out with the
I think
warning.
town meeting is an information meeting,
Right.
and that's the.
Right.
In a lot of cases, but people are going to be voting a money sum, so it's more than information. You're going to explain what you're doing. The one question I have on this is to pursue hiring, or is it to hire? To say to pursue hiring, what are you going to do? Go and get a company that's going to headhunt for you? That's not your purpose. But
Right,
to
right.
pursue hiring, it pushes it out. To hire is what you're going to
It
do.
wasn't, we haven't decided to hire
hire
though. We've
yet.
decided to, we're asking the town if they're willing to give us the money, and if they are, then we will consider hiring a town manager. It's not if they give us the money, we will hire a town manager. That's what it was designed as.
And that's what you'll need to talk about at the town meeting.
Right.
To say to pursue sounds like you're gonna have an outside organization, you're gonna pay them that 25,000, just like we did with the water issue. People,
Okay.
when we did that, we paid consultants,
Oh.
and that's what your money was for, was to pay the consultants to bring the information to
That
the
is
town to vote
I
on.
see what you mean. Yeah, that is confusing. Yeah, that
Yeah,
makes
so
sense.
shall the town,
To hire, that's what you want, that
allow the
specific
select board to pursue the
25,000
hiring of the town
is not to
administrator.
pursue, but to
Right.
hire.
Right.
Oh, thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. We haven't decided to hire. All the decision
Right.
is to pursue hiring or to look into hiring. Why it costs 25K? It's me.
All I did,
So that's, sorry.
I just asked a question about, is there gonna be any information going out before the town meeting? That's all I wanted to know. I don't wanna change this, we already approved it. You know, that's all I was asking.
Right. And valid question.
And then we were gonna, you know, I just wondered if, is the job description or something gonna go out in the minutes? Or are we just gonna go in and tell everybody what we got in mind? At the town meeting, they're gonna go in blind about this. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, well, our intent
I'm
was.
not asking to change it. I
To have some
Right, but
information
maybe-
out there.
Do
The
we
town,
want to change it?
No.
This is the opportunity, no? You don't want
and
to?
the job,
No, we just approved it. We just approved the
we can
warning.
retract that if we really.
You can't do it. It's already approved.
Right, that's exactly right.
So our intent is to have some information available prior to the meeting in the town report of what this position entails and why we are pursuing it.
Okay.
It will be a town administrator, that's a key difference. Sometimes the word manager gets thrown in there. It's not a town manager, it's not somebody running the town. It's somebody to assist the board and to assist the treasurer and the clerk if necessary, but to assist in administering the town governance.
It's going in the town report.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And
that's
then
all
the
I want to
other
know.
thing I wanted to add to this, because it had come up, is that we do not have the job description yet. So that goes back to what Tom's point too, that we are pursuing this, that we are still drafting what this role will look like based on feedback we get, based on the needs with anything, the needs that arise.
Well, I think just the way you define the difference between an administrator and a town manager is going to be very helpful for anybody watching this, and that's going to do you a favor at town meeting. People have a better understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay, thank you, Andy. Yeah, that's good, thanks. So, okay, Charlie, I know, but,
No, he's John.
John B. Yes, Charlie. But is that an issue, a question to this point, or is?
Are you finished voting?
We
Yeah,
are.
They already voted it in, yeah.
But,
I just wanted to thank you for having
Okay.
an in-person town meeting. I think this discussion is a perfect example of why it's important to get the community together and answer questions about things that are on, the agenda. Whereas, a ballot kind of situation, you just can't do that.
yeah, and with the ballot, we would have had an informational meeting, but we definitely felt very strongly last year when we had, when it was given to us, so to speak, as an opportunity to go to Australian ballot, that we felt it didn't make sense for us. Charlie, and then I'll get back into the agenda.
One real short one, Greg.
Yeah.
Good idea to put an explanation in your select board town report, your article, your letter to the citizens in the town report. Suggestion, put that all together in a one-page handout to have available in print at the town meeting, so that people can pick it up and read it as they walk in.
Sure. Yep, not everybody goes through the whole report, I'm sure.
No, and you can expand on it. Your report's gonna cover a whole lot of other stuff. You may not have space, but you can put a lot more detail on what the proposal was all about and the select board's reasons for recommending this or suggesting it, or however you wanna phrase it. I don't wanna write it for you. I'll read it and comment if you want me to, but it's basically the board's business. But a good way to explain what you have to help people to understand what you have in mind is to have a one-page explanation in paper for people to pick up and read when they walk in.
Absolutely. Yep, thank you. Thank you both for your comment. Okay, item number 4, to review the planning commission's proposal for several road reclassifications. So the planning commission has been working on this for a while. I know Keith and I met over 2 years ago, I think, to kind of start this conversation.
Not quite. Not quite that
close. He had been working also with our previous road commissioner, and there's been quite a lot of, very much a lot of effort that's gone into this to draft up some recommendations as the planning commission is tasked with doing, to recommend and bring forward plans to the board. So this is kind of the first step to just a little bit to get acclimated, I guess, with what is happening and the rationale behind it. And I will kind of turn it over to Charlie, and Charlie has asked too that I kind of lead through this a little bit, where we're going and what we're talking about, but Charlie can fill in the detail.
Just because I'm significantly visually impaired, blind as a bat, as they say, and I really can't read the print copies in here, so I asked Greg to sort of help me out by reading from the list, the summary list, and other parts of it that are relevant. But I want to start out by saying that I think there have been some road reclassifications and discontinuances in the past, but the select board has not been aware that it's a legal requirement if the board proposes to change the classification of a highway or discontinue a highway, that they provide notice to the town planning commission. And that's been kind of skipped in some instances in the past. This time, the board was aware that there is a requirement that if the board is going to act to change a classification or discontinue a highway or a trail, they have to give the planning commission notice. So Greg was good enough to sort of agree with my suggestion. We reached the agreement that it would work better for the planning commission to look at this issue first and bring its input, a report and recommendation, rather than waiting for the formal notice that the board is required to give the planning commission, but might not remember to. So that's sort of how the planning commission became involved in this. The statute says that the statute doesn't define what the planning commission is supposed to do. It only states that the board must provide the planning commission with legal notice, giving us an opportunity to weigh in. So this is our report and recommendation. If you do decide to go ahead with any of these proposals or suggestions, in the case of reclassification or discontinuance, you must legally warn a public hearing. I can go into the details of that a little bit later. But the Planning Commission looked at this from the perspective of the provisions of the town plan and the way these roads fit into the transportation network of a town, from what we know of the roads and the circumstances of the roads, and we weren't able to quite follow the town plan. The 2017 town plan refers to a town policy on Class 4 roads and trails, which I remember vaguely. It was a long time ago. It was right around the turn of this century. The Planning Commission, I think, became concerned that the Select Board was proposing to discontinue roads that might have public value for recreational purposes, hiking, bicycling, things like that. And they recommended a policy which the board adopted, but Sarah looked for it and she's not able to find it, and we haven't been able to find a copy, so we can't use it. My recollection of that policy is that it was quite broad and general, and it basically said that the Select Board would refrain from discontinuing public highways or legal trails if they had potential future value for transportation or recreational purposes. But I clearly remember that that policy also contained a kind of a disclaimer that was added in at the end of the document that said that the Select Board reserves the right to do anything and everything that the law says we have the right to do, which is, you always do. You don't have to reserve that right. If the statute gives you a responsibility or a duty or authority to make a decision, you make it based on all the evidence that you can get and use your own collective good judgment. But we did not consider the provisions of the town plan with respect to that policy because we don't have a copy of the policy. So have you all had an opportunity to look through our report and recommendation?
I think one other thing, one other thing I should have added right at the beginning. This is kind of based, I mean, the initiative behind this was, came from a couple different angles. One was, and maybe I alluded to it a little bit, one was from our road foreman based on I guess for the realities of what's going on out there and what roads are, roads / trails and things like that, or what's happening out there. And the other was there have been a few requests that have come forward from citizens and things like that too about potentially reclassifying some roads. So
that's right, and there's also included in there is a prior recommendation of the Jamaica Planning Commission made. I can't remember the exact date. It was over 10 years ago. The Jamaica Planning Commission brought forward a recommendation to the Select Board to discontinue LT10, and the Select Board never acted on that recommendation. So in essence, we've re-recommending that be done and stated, in part at least, our reasoning for why we think that would be the most appropriate way for the town to deal with LT10.
What does LT mean?
Legal trail.
Okay.
TH, and those abbreviations are explained right at the very beginning,
Okay.
Andy, but it's a little hard to see. But TH stands for town highway, and that's the way the state, the V-Trans highway maps designate the highways as TH1, TH2. That means town highway number 1 and number 2. LT number 1, LT number 2 are the legal trails.
Can I ask you a quick question, Charlie?
Yeah.
I think I may have this wrong, but is our classification as a Pent Road, is that within the Select Board's authority to undertake without notice and hearing and site visit?
Yes.
It is, okay.
It is. That's stated in the report, and the statutory site is in there if you look carefully. If you want to email me later, I'll give you the
Page 2.
I'll give you the lowdown on that, but it is in there.
Yeah, it's just that at the beginning, somewhere earlier in the introduction, I thought it was saying that any reclassification requires that. But
Well,
then you're
yes.
right, in the description of Pent Roads, it says the select board may grant permission.
There are two different processes
Yeah.
here for different types of action. A reclassification of a highway, or a discontinuance of a highway, or a change
Or a
from a
trail.
highway to a legal trail
Right.
requires the public
Okay.
hearing process.
But the Pent Roads
But
are
the
outside.
authorization to pent a portion of a road or a legal trail, penting means to establish a gate or
Yeah.
a bar.
Yeah,
And the authority to regulate, including prohibiting the use of motor vehicles on segments of highways and legal
Okay.
trails, is an authority that the select board can undertake on its own motion without conducting a public hearing.
okay.
So I wanted to make that distinction in the report, and I think you should all keep it in mind. And when we're talking about changing a classification or discontinuance means that the town abandons its legal title to the right of way. And the right of way reverts to the owner of the land upon which the right of way exists. So if there's a legal trail on my property and the select board votes after due process to discontinue it, it then becomes exclusively my property to regulate and manage as I choose. It's no longer a public right of way.
So at least two of these recommendations,
Yeah, the last two.
we could act on today.
That's correct. You could act on them tonight, although we don't really have time tonight, I think. And also, you need carefully written orders because the record of the select board's action to authorize the penting of a road and to regulate
Has to
motor
be
vehicle use
specific.
must be in writing. That's in the statute, and it must be recorded in the town records.
Right.
So before the select board acts on those two recommendations, we need to carefully draft and probably have the town attorney review the legal language, the motion that you will act on to do that so it can be properly recorded in the town records.
Do we know now, Charlie, which, in what chain of title these would have to be recorded? Do we know which properties specifically they impact? The areas that you require, that the planning commission, with
They
respect to
don't
the
have to-
Pent Roads?
No. With respect to LT 11, we definitely do, and I believe
Okay.
we also know all of the owners of LT 25. Luke Rogers is one of the adjoining landowners, and someone that I've consulted with. He's sitting right back here on LT 25, and he's been in contact with most of the other adjoining landowners.
Okay.
Chris Robinson, whom you all know,
Oh,
is
okay.
another owner of frontage on LT 25. So
Okay.
I think we know all the
Okay.
owners that are affected by those legal trails. But the action to authorize the penting of the road or regulate motor vehicles does not have to be recorded with their deeds. It has to be recorded as
Right.
an action of the select board in the town records. Now, Sarah's in charge of managing the town records these days, but I think the way that's done is to include the written motion as passed by the select board in the town records.
Yes, but I think just my personal view is it should be cross-referenced to each of the owners that are impacted. Otherwise, it's, for those of us who do title searches, it's a misery, so.
Well, that is not a statutory requirement, to the best of my knowledge.
Agree.
It's possible it might be in some other part of the statute, it's not in Title 19. But that's an issue that the town clerk and the board
Right.
should work out, and
Right.
the JPC doesn't have a take on that. And I don't personally, I
It's
understand
one of
what you're
Yeah.
saying, Jessica, and I
Yeah.
agree that it would be much more helpful. It's
Right.
very hard to find some of those old records of road actions in the
Right.
town records because
Right.
they're not indexed and they're not
Right.
cross-referenced.
Right,
So I guess I want to, before we get too down in the
okay,
weeds on
we can
stuff,
stop, sorry.
I think at least in my conversation with Charlie, my takeaway was that this would be more of an introduction to this process, and that we wouldn't dive into, I mean, Charlie can, and we're gonna walk through each of these roads that have come up just so that we're all familiar with them. And then, but not to really take any action on any of the reclasses, but not even take action on the penting, even though we could, but just, so we still get all our heads around it a little bit more.
Yeah, so I asked at the end rather than
Okay.
the beginning, I apologize.
I think that maybe in a month to 2 months, we might be at a point where we have scheduled and held a public hearing for reclassification or discontinuance, and the board at that time would be ready to take up formal action on the authorization to pent LT 11 and LT 25. I believe it'll take us a couple of months. Just the sheer process requirements identifying and providing formal notice to all the statutory parties takes a long time.
Yeah, and I think these obviously all have to be acted on independently for the sake of knowledge. It made sense that they're all presented together, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that,
I'm sorry.
I mean, I think the other thing that the planning commission I know has, and also that I feel strongly on this, what you referred to it earlier, I can't remember what you had called it before, but what we couldn't find, our policy of really strongly, I mean, you know, not just free willy-nilly giving up our right-of-ways. So I think the planning commission I know has kept that top of mind, and that's how I strongly feel that way too. So there's a lot of effort going into these to justify anything other than that. So
Yes, that's right. When we looked at all of these proposals to change the classifications and to discontinue, we kept in mind it's not specifically stated in the Jamaica Town Plan, but there's unanimous agreement amongst the members of the Planning Commission that the town should not give up public right-of-ways if there's rights of way, if there's reason to believe that we need or might need them for future transportation use or public recreational use.
yeah, thanks. Do you want to go through these now, just at a top level, to kind of let people know what roads?
Sure, or I answer questions. My suggestion in an email that I think Greg distributed part of an email that I sent to him about my suggestion for how to sort of move this forward. And my thought was that it might be easiest for us to take a look at and find out if there's consensus about our recommendations for take no action at this time. Those are the first items on the summary list on the last page. Unless some member of the board has strong reason to feel that the town should act on any of those proposals, then we can just say that's done. No action is no action.
And also, I would say, not only do we feel, or possibly would anybody feel that we should take action, but also freely speak up if anyone feels that we're not quite ready yet to even think about it.
I'm not ready.
Even on those couple.
I mean, without getting in the weeds, the four here to take no action at this time. Well, not to be crass, but we just don't do anything. We're gonna deal with it later. I'm not sure what they.
I mean, that's a possibility that we come back and say, wait a minute, I disagree with the planning commission.
Yes.
Yeah, we didn't mean, Andy, that we're recommending that we take no action tonight. I don't think the board is going to make any decisions tonight, one way or the other.
Right.
The take no action recommendations are response to suggestions or requests from town employees or landowners that the classifications of a couple of roads be changed. There's one request from a landowner that a segment of road be discontinued. And the planning commission has given reasons in our recommendation why we feel that the board should not do that. That the classifications are correct and they should be retained as they are now. So the decision to take no action is a decision that in this particular proceeding, to consider these issues that are addressed in the report, the board is not going to act to change anything. But circumstances may change in the future, and 5 or 6 years from now, it's possible that because circumstances have changed, the board may decide to take up one or more of those issues.
I think maybe that you and I, just as the liaison between this board and the planning commission, are more educated or whatever on what these details are.
Mm-hmm.
My sense is that maybe the rest of us are feeling that we want to use this meeting as an educational meeting and not take no action.
That's what I was
Yeah.
trying to figure out.
Yeah. And so not even to get to the point of saying, not take no action, yeah.
Okay, well, why don't we go through that list of planning commission recommendation for no action in this general proceeding. The idea that the planning commission had in basically pooling these several different requests and proposals together is that it's logistically quite a bit easier. That the public hearing warning and the conducting of the public hearing is lengthy and complicated and time consuming. And so instead of dealing with these issues one by one and having a separate public hearing for every issue that has come before to the select board's attention, it saves time and effort to pull them together and hold one public hearing. And the board has done that in the past. There was one very large mass conversion of roads from public highways to legal trails that occurred in 1968. And in several other instances, the board has pulled together a number of suggested actions and conducted one public hearing covering all of them. So, Greg, do you think that, do you want to go through the no action during this process issues one by one? Starting, I think the first one is Skinner Swamp Road.
So if I could just sort of pipe up a little
Yes.
bit, you know, having,
It
recalling
could be
in some detail our meeting with Keith. So I guess I would just, you know, want to say that I heard Keith's concerns, certainly with respect to Skinner Swamp Road and to White Road, and it looks like the recommendation of the JPC is, at least for now, to take no action.
Meaning
So I
leave
guess
them as they are.
Leave them as they are, which means that Keith still has, you know, the issues that he's struggled with or would hope to resolve, which may be the right answer. I just want it to be clear that I remember that. I think that, you know, this board wants to be sensitive to, you know, to the recommendation that was initially made and why, and just maybe hear a little bit more about what the back and forth was there in terms of those two roads. Is that too much to ask, Charlie?
No, hardly anything too much to ask. The problem is I'm only smart enough to answer. I never know. We did consider the difficulty of plowing both of those roads. They're narrow and they're fairly rough, and they barely meet the Class 3 requirements, physical requirements. So there are a couple of the roads that are more difficult to plow. And the reason that the Jamaica Planning Commission recommends against changing the classification to Class 4, which would remove the town's responsibility or duty to maintain them in the winter, is that they provide access to existing homes. There's 2 homes on Skinner Swamp Road and at least one, I think maybe 1.5 on White Road. They are, Keith referred to them as being seasonal homes, and he suggested that I think the way he put it was, I hardly ever see anybody there, so they don't really need to have it plowed out. The issue that the Planning Commission sees is that those people bought their property and have paid their taxes like everybody else, and whether they occupy their homes all the time or it's up to the individual homeowner as to how often they want to be home in the winter. But insurance and security issues are significant, and many, if not all, comprehensive homeowner insurance policies require that the property be accessible at all times. So if the town decides to change the classification of existing roads that have been maintained in the past and to stop maintaining them, that puts the landowner and the homeowner, the owner of the structure that road provides access to, in a significant disadvantage, and gives them a valid reason to argue that the value of their property has been significantly decreased because the value they have to make up the service. And the second issue that the Planning Commission considered when we talked about those 2 specific roads is, if the town of Jamaica is going to undertake a new policy of changing the classification of roads that lead to existing structures and existing homes that have been classified for a long time as Class 3 roads and maintained in the past, if we're going to stop maintaining them in the winter because we consider it difficult or expensive, where do we draw the line? How do we make that decision about who gets the service and who doesn't? It crosses each member of the Planning Commission's mind that if the Select Board decides to stop plowing the road to the home that exists at the end of White Road because it's inconvenient, expensive to plow it in the winter, and then that raises the question of which roads are next and where do we stop? And The planning commission feels that the town plan, in a very general way, there's no specific policy on this, but in a very general way, the town plan encourages existing and expanded development in the areas that are served by our existing road system. And in general way, the town plan creates an expectation that the town will maintain a highway network that will provide access to at least to the existing residential structures. And it's for that reason that we make our recommendation that the select board should not undertake to change the classification from class 3 to class 4 and cease winter maintenance of roads that have traditionally been maintained in the winter if those roads lead to homes, residences, or other structures that are used by people that have a need to have access to their buildings, even if it's just for security, the caretaker, the fire department, the police, or for their own convenience, or if they, an owner who doesn't want to occupy their home in the winter might want to rent it to someone. For all of those reasons, we felt that it's better for the town. We also collect more state aid reimbursement per mile for class 3 roads than for class 4. And the idea is that, in part, that increased state aid is to compensate for the cost of maintaining the road in the winter.
Okay.
The way you
Hang
saw
on, sorry.
the White Road, I believe the Neville's own that,
Yes.
public knowledge. That's a sizable property, that one building. And then the other one, is that the old white, is that the old schoolhouse or something?
Yep.
Is that what they're talking about?
Yeah.
No, I understand I appreciate the Jamaica Planning Commission's take on that, on not, making that their responsibility. I know, they use that house. I mean,
Yeah, so the planning commission, that came as a request from Keith.
well, I'm just saying.
I mean, he laid out, it wasn't just that one road.
I know,
He said this
I know.
road, that road, this
No,
road,
I know,
that.
but I
So
understand.
they're saying, don't do it, keep it.
It's
gonna
Pandora's box, maybe,
Yeah.
I would be against
Right,
that road
That's the
being.
point they're saying.
That's
It's a
exactly
slippery
what-
slope.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Yeah.
so.
I got a couple of questions, but I don't want to get too far into answering all kinds of questions on any
I just
little
have
thing,
a-
but go ahead.
Point of history for
Yeah.
White Road.
Yeah,
That's as far as the town plowed. They turned around in White's yard and came back into town. You didn't used to plow all the way up through West Jamaica. So this is a legacy thing,
right.
because that was the end of the road, because that was the last family who was there year round. And then you came back into town.
Yeah, interesting.
So that's why you're plowing that road, is because of the Whites being
Yeah,
there.
and there's all kinds of dead-end roads that get plowed. I live on one, and
And I live on one that doesn't.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
And so a lot of it's what's been established and how it's, the
Yeah.
his-
Right,
just the
yeah.
history.
Yeah,
Plenty,
yeah.
plenty of homeowners that are part of road maintenance agreements and
yeah.
they, like Greg, have to pay.
Paul?
I guess, I'm not sure who this should go to, but either one of you, do we have any input from the Jamaica Fire Department regarding these?
Not from the fire department I'm aware of. I know Keith now has seen this, but I haven't gotten comment back from him on what the.
Well, we did not. The Jamaica Planning Commission did not contact the fire department. We probably should have. So
I'm just thinking, without getting into details. what you
we
said.
considered fire and police protection and general property security in making our recommendations about White Road and Skinner Swamp Road. And we also took into account that many of our legal trails, in addition to providing access to timberland for logging purposes, also provide very necessary and important access for firefighting equipment in the event of forest fires. And we mentioned that in our report, that maintaining the ability to get tankers out into the woods to move water into areas where you can get it onto the fire is exceedingly important, and that's one of the reasons why some of those legal trails have significant public value.
I just thought that out because.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, but I don't think anything recommended in here has any bearing. There's nothing suggested that would outright limit the ability of a firefighter getting down the road.
Well, if you're talking about discontinuing winter maintenance on structures that are at the end of some road, because they're not used that very often.
But the recommendations were not to discontinue.
I hear what you're saying, but I'm saying that sort of blends in the question, okay, they only use it at Christmas time.
Well, that's exactly what the recommendation is.
Yeah, that burns down.
Plow 5 or 6 times a month. I
Yeah.
hear you. I just want to blend that in as a factor.
Paul, we were aware of that, and we considered it, we were discussing those issues, and we put it in our report.
Yeah.
Maintaining access for firefighting and other security purposes is important to the landowners. That's one of the reasons why we maintain a road network year-round, winter and summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I don't want to
Skinner
get too
Swamp Road.
on all these. I mean, we're only in the first road here, so, but I don't know if the board here has any specific questions on.
No, that was sort of the general question.
I think a lot of general
Yeah.
questions got answered on that first
Yeah,
road. So,
Skinner
yeah.
Swamp Road is this identical circumstance. to
Right.
the road. The road isn't identical, but it's not particularly easy to plow, but it's definitely possible to plow it, and it has been plowed for as long as I can remember. And for the same reasons, we feel that it should remain a Class 3 highway and be maintained in the winter.
Right.
So what's the next one on the list, Gary?
A hollow road.
Okay. Hollow Road is a short segment of an old town highway that extends off of Dalewood Road. And it used to run into a site where there was a home that belonged to Forrest and Carlotta Woodruff quite a long time ago. That home no longer exists. And it's now part of a large parcel of land that has frontage on both Pikes Falls Road and Dalewood Road. It's owned by, I think it's by a trust. I don't know the owner. It's now inside of a large parcel of land, and it has remained on our books as a Class 3 road, but the town has not been maintaining it winter or summer for quite some time, which means that the town is not living up to its responsibility to keep it maintained. And according to Keith, some years back they removed a culvert because the culvert was unsafe, and then the V-Trans engineer recommended that they take it out because it was unsafe. So it's a segment of road that, in theory, we should be maintaining winter and summer, but we've not been doing it. And because it does not provide access to any existing structures, and because that parcel of land has significant access and frontage on both Pikes Falls Road and Dalewood Road, the Planning Commission does not feel that it's necessary or advisable for the town to continue to incorrectly carry it on our books as a Class 3 road. And instead, we recommend that it be converted to a legal trail because it does have, in our view, possible potential public use in the future, depending on, that land is in a rural resource area, and the town plan anticipates that there may be additional development there in the future, and it may become important for that reason. And it's also part of an old town road that makes a loop from Pikes Falls Road through that parcel of land onto Dalewood Road. And although the remainder of it was apparently discontinued, it no longer shows up on the V-Trans maps. It's not listed on our books right now as being publicly owned, but with the agreement of the property owner or a future property owner, it is definite potential there to turn it into a bicycle pedestrian pathway or part of a trail system that uses both existing roads and trails. So because we think it has potential for future public use for transportation and for recreational purposes, we think the town should keep the right of way, but basically get rid of the pretense that we're going to maintain it, because we haven't been maintaining it, and there's no reason for us to maintain it because it doesn't provide access to any structures.
Yep, that makes sense. Any questions on that one?
No.
Next one was LT 26, which is the Rawson Bridge, or
Yes.
or that there is a legal trail that goes basically across the bridge.
Yep, there's a legal trail right away that extends from West Jamaica Road across the Brookwood Bridges, and then maybe 50 feet or so, I don't know the exact distance, but very short distance, onto the land on the other side of the brook.
And we're all familiar with it because of the bridge.
Yes, you've had lots of discussions about that.
The bridge.
Yeah.
I believe that Mr. Simmons told the board that he was withdrawing his request, in essence, or dropping his request that the town discontinue that, and instead is pursuing the possibility of selling his property to the U.S. Forest Service, Green Mountain National
Yeah.
Forest.
Yeah.
To the best of my knowledge, that transaction has not gone through. It's not completed yet, but that apparently is the direction he wants to move in. That would be consistent with the Jamaica Town Plan, which recognizes that entire area as a conservation land use district. So it would be in keeping with the Jamaica Town Plan. And the existence of that right-of-way leading from West Jamaica Road onto that parcel in that area could become in the future important public access to public land. If the Forest Service owned it and wanted to cooperate with the town, either the town could restore a bridge there. The present bridge is in pretty bad shape. I think you've heard a lot about that, and you've got an engineering report that indicates it needs a lot of very expensive work.
Mhm.
So the Planning Commission's take on that is remove the bridge because it's not needed. It's not safe and it's blocked off from vehicle use, at least from one end, although somebody could get onto it from the other end with an ATV and fall through it, which would be awkward and unfortunate. So for economic reasons, among others, we think it would be best to take that bridge out before it falls into the brook, but keep the right of way in the event that it might prove valuable in the future for public access to potentially a very large block of national forest land on Sage Hill.
Okay.
Is there any downside to removing a right-of-way?
Removing a right of way?
Yeah, just discontinuing it as a right-of-way. I mean, why
Yes.
would we not keep it anyway? No.
Yes, the Planning Commission believes that town rights of way of old town highways have potential value both for future transportation purposes. That if somebody buys land and builds houses, or a housing development that is in keeping with the provisions of the town plan that is supported by the town, might need to use one or more of those old town highways for transportation purposes to gain access. They also have significant, they're very valuable, some of them anyway, for recreational purposes. Some of them are heavily used by hikers and bicyclists, and when it's safe to do so, horseback riding. They're also used by off-road motor vehicle enthusiasts, jeepers, people.
No, I understand. I'm sorry, but I asked the exact opposite question that I wanted to ask. I mean, why would we not retain the right-of-way? What reason would there be not to retain the right-of-way in any case, in any of these cases?
I can't speak to why Mr. Simons initially requested the town discontinue the right-of-way, and I can't speak to the reasons for the owner of property on Millbrook Road, which we're going to get to in just a minute. Same situation, the owner had requested that the town highway be discontinued. I don't want to speculate on what motivates individuals to make requests like that, but in a very general way, I think some individuals feel that if it were mine, then I could keep everybody else off of it, and I could do what I wanted with it. I could build a house in the middle of it, or put my garage in the middle of the road, if it were mine.
I think his request also, prior to realizing the expense of replacing the bridge, he felt that if it was his bridge, if we discontinued the trail, the bridge
He would fix it.
would revert to him, and
Right.
that, assuming or thinking, his thinking was that the bridge would be a lot less expensive to replace. And he was seeing the town wasn't replacing the bridge, so he said, I want to replace the bridge, so give me the trail.
But he wasn't gonna do it unless he owned the property, yeah. And
Yeah,
then-
so I think that's his perspective. But I also think, Blake Road is another one, another just leading into, which is an example of potentially why you want to give up a road. And you had also mentioned Millbrook, that particular landowner who has built a house there, more or less the town highway, the class 4 highway leads to his front door, and it's his driveway, and he didn't want people driving into his house, basically, so that's why he's asking. So there are reasons why the owners would give, why they want it to be discontinued.
The Planning Commission believes that the town should be very careful about what we discontinue, that most of our public roads and rights of way have public value or potentially have public value. And we should be very cautious and selective. We have made recommendations to discontinue a segment of the Turkey Mountain Road and Legal Trail number 10 and Blake Road for different reasons, which we'll get to in a few minutes. But in general, does that answer your question, Kate?
Yes.
Okay.
Just another point for some information. I serve on the Wyndham Regional Commission for Jamaica on the Transportation Committee, as does Joel Blooming, and we continuously hear it's not a good habit to give up any trails if we can help it. It's bad practice if it can be avoided.
I would wonder why the town would ever want to.
Right. Well, it's
To avoid
discouraging.
the maintenance responsibility, to
Yes.
avoid the controversy, to avoid complaints from landowners and others that segments of public roads or legal trails are being abused or heavily damaged, to just get rid of the issue has been a sentiment that prior select boards have succumbed to. I think that I believe that the town of Jamaica has discontinued a number of public rights of way in past years that should have been retained and that would have significant recreational value today if they were still public property. But that's over and done with. This is why the Planning Commission is grateful for the opportunity to weigh in, and it's grateful that the Select Board recognizes that we're a statutory party to any of these proceedings, and it's the reason we put the time and energy into thinking these issues through and making our report.
Okay. Yep, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, Charlie, you want to keep going? We feel good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Let's keep going through the list until the board runs out of steam or until we get through the list.
There's not too many. So Blake Road would be the next one. Take it away.
Are we still on
I think
recommendations of no action? Have we covered
No.
No, this is recommended for discontinuance.
No, I think we're kind of in consensus here that the board's not gonna take any action on any action or no action even.
Yeah.
And so we're just kind of
Right.
getting your perspective, I guess.
I think Millbrook Road is one that's on that list of the Jamaica Planning Commission recommends not acting on a landowner request, and you partly covered that.
Right.
Does any board member have any questions about that particular
No.
road segment?
Skip one, sorry, yeah. Yeah, so Millbrook Road is formerly the old Route 100, I guess even before it was Route 100. It's in Rossonville, and it's got two sections that dead end at a bridge, an old bridge that's no longer there, and it's 100 yards long at most.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Then on to Blake Road. Blake Road is a short segment, I think it's 7/10 of a mile, it shows up on the state map anyway, 7/10 of a mile long. It extends off of West Jamaica Road into the center of a large parcel of land that used to belong many years ago to the Blake family. It went through a succession of owners and conservation purchasers and is now owned by the Green Mountain National Forest. And Blake Road provides important logging access to logging vehicles, timber management vehicles into the Green Mountain National Forest parcel. It dead ends at the site of the former Blake family home, which was removed when the Forest Service bought the property. So there's no building on it now. It dead ends in a very large wetland complex that is recognized as exceedingly important wildlife habitat, particularly for black bear, but also many other species of wildlife, because it provides an important spring feeding area. It's mentioned in the Jamaica Town Plan, in the regional plan. It's a lot of effort has gone into conserving the land around it in order to preserve its wildlife habitat values over the years. And Blake Road has very little potential except for walking or very short mountain bike or bicycle ride for future recreational use, because it just disappears into a large swamp, basically. And the Jamaica Planning Commission feels that, well, right, I should back up and say that right now, Blake Road is carried on our books as a Class 3 highway, but it's another one of those instances of a Class 3 road that once led to someone's home, that the town traditionally maintained, then they stopped maintaining it when the ownership changed and the home was removed, but it was still carried on the books as a Class 3 road, but we don't maintain it. I was there this past late summer, and it's growing light brush. Hasn't been graded or hasn't been touched in many years. There's evidence of a few vehicles driving in and out of there, but not very many. And essentially, it's entirely within the Green Mountain National Forest. So I talked to the Manchester District Ranger and the forest engineer. They have a policy, they don't encourage or discourage towns. Their policy is that the management responsibility for town roads belongs to the town select boards, and they don't interfere. But they would welcome, if the town wanted to discontinue the road, they would gladly accept the ownership responsibility that would revert to them, and they have the money and the staff and programs and policies already in place to manage that roadway as an internal part of their Forest Service system for multiple uses, such as logging access, and I assume with limitations to respect and protect the wildlife habitat, human access. So that is one that the Planning Commission feels that discontinuance of the road, the town road, would remove the conflict in classification. That is, we're supposed to be maintaining it and we aren't. And it would also satisfy the issue of preserving public access, because we would not be turning over title and management responsibility to private owners. Instead, it would transfer the ownership and the management responsibility from one public body, the town of Jamaica, to another, the U.S. Forest Service.
And there, from you were speaking with them, they would not, I mean, I don't know the classification of the forest in that area, if it's specific to wildlife as an example. There would potentially be, or could there potentially be some restrictions on the use of that road for public access?
Yes, they do not. It is their policy that they do not speculate or make announcements about what their management policies would be until they have title to the land. They don't project about what they might or might not do in the future if they own that right of way. They would, if they did own it, they would manage it according to their own policies and protocols for mixed public use and access. The minimum public access is access by foot. And they were the forest engineer and the district ranger were both very specific in that all of the forest, the national forest, is open to humans traveling on foot. Trails and roadways within the national forest are regulated and managed by the Forest Service for multiple uses, including recreational uses that could include, but might not necessarily include, things like mountain bike riding, horseback riding, even limited vehicle access. But those decisions would be made by the Forest Service according to their own practices and policies that are long established after they obtain ownership. They're not going to tell us in advance what they might do if the town decides to give them title and management responsibility to the right of way.
Okay, yeah, that would just be a concern to say, okay, now they're going to restrict the use of that road even more than the town would.
Well, right now,
nobody
the
can
town
use the
doesn't
road.
restrict the use of the road in any way.
Right, exactly, but the Forest Service may.
Absolutely,
That's
yes.
what a concern
They
is.
very likely would restrict motor vehicle access, particularly at times when there's a problem with people in cars and trucks interfering with the spring feeding of black bears in those wetlands.
Yeah.
They would probably, I'm saying this as a matter of general forest policy. I'm not speaking for them because they don't want to publicly predict what they'll do in the future, but in a general way, they allow vehicles and horseback riders into areas of the forest where they think it's safe and reasonable in conjunction with the other uses and values that they've attached to the land, such as protecting the wildlife habitat.
Makes sense.
So, yes, if the select board has the authority to regulate the use of motor vehicles and types of uses on that, what is now a Class 3 town highway. We could keep it as a Class 3 town highway and start plowing it in the winter if we wanted to, but the Planning Commission does not feel that there's any need or advisability to spend town funds to maintain it, because it's almost entirely, with the possible exception of a very small piece of the right-of-way that may be on Margaret Miller's parcel, The rest of it's on the Forest Service property.
All right.
All right, right. Okay. Any other questions on that one? So next one here is, it's actually part of a town highway class 3, Turkey Mountain Road, and where it then transitions to LT10, legal trail 10.
That was a really good explanation, thank you, in the, this summary, I thought. Detailed summary was very helpful.
Okay, anybody have any questions on the Planning Commission's recommendation to discontinue the segment of Class 3 Turkey Mountain Road that's within the state park and LT10, which LT10 is part of the old Town Highway 20. It was all Turkey Mountain Road until sometime in the early 1930s when they changed the access to West Windham and by way of the road through Windham, and people stopped using that part of it because it was just too rough and impassable in the wintertime. The Planning Commission recommendation is to discontinue that segment of the Class 3 road inside the park and LT10 because that would cause ownership and maintenance responsibility to revert to the state, and the state's been very clear that they have the people in place, they have the funding, they have the process to manage it for public recreational purposes. That's their mission in life. They can't do it if the town owns it, but if we transfer ownership to them, they can and they will.
And it's supported by the one landowner, so.
Yes, that landowner happens to be my sister and brother-in-law, and I've spoken with them, not this brother-in-law, the other one. But I have spoken with them, and they want to save the trail, as I pointed out in the report. It has been very badly damaged. It's deeply eroded and washing. Sediment is being dumped onto the adjoining state land, state natural area, and into Cobb Brook. It's causing a lot of damage. And there's no way to stop the erosion without preventing motor vehicles, off-road, jeeper enthusiasts.
Is that what's happening?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
See
that
jeeps
road
coming
has
out of
been,
there like
that road has been ripped apart.
Yeah.
And it's now part of because the public highways and legal trails are shown on the V-Trans maps on the internet, the word about LT10 being a wonderful place to go for an off-road vehicle adventure has been advertised on the internet. So there are convoys, organized convoys of Land Rovers and Jeeps and Toyotas and Unimogs and stuff. People that are out to have a rousing good time by bashing their vehicles over rocks and through gullies and up and down brook beds and town legal trails. And we, the Newtons and the Peck family, who own the land that surrounds that trail, have tried for years to keep it together, to keep it from washing out. We can't keep ahead of them. As fast as you go up in there and turn the water out with a shovel, or I used to work on it when I had a dozer. As fast as you patch it, somebody would come in and 2 or 3 Jeeps would rip their way through there and tear it all up again.
Do they intrude on the national park? Do they go through there?
They do go out of there are really deep gullies in places on LT10. The town right of way is 50 feet wide, and the old traveled roadway is in the middle of that 50-foot wide strip. And in places it's a V-shaped gully like this that's 6-7 feet deep. And ATV riders and some off-road vehicle users find it too difficult to thrash through those gullies, and so they claw out new routes outside of the town right away onto state land in the state natural area. There are 2 places on LT10 where in particular, in recent years, vehicles have started doing that because it's just too difficult for them to claw their way up what used to be the town road. They also break their vehicles. Several vehicles have been smashed and had to be pulled out of there with wreckers because it's too rough. It's not safe for vehicle use. It's not safe for horseback riding. There was a serious accident up in there a couple of years ago. A woman was riding her horse, and the horse was trying to climb up one of those wet, muddy gullies over a mud-covered ledge. The horse slipped and fell, pinned the rider, and broke her leg. She was lucky she had a cell phone and cell service, so she could call Rescue Inc. and they went up and carried her out. But it needs a lot of work, and it can't be restored for safe use for hiking, bicycling, or horseback riding until we find a way to stop the vehicles from tearing it up. the state has stated in the letter that's attached to that report that they have the ability to do that, and they'll do it as soon as they can if they add ownership responsibility.
Okay, any other questions on that one? Good, thank you, Charlie. Let's see, LT 11, which is kind of somewhat parallels Turkey Mountain Road, and you want to talk to that one a little bit?
Yeah, there are similar circumstances there, but LT 11 is in much better condition. It runs through my family's land. I own part of the adjoining land. My two sisters and their husbands own the rest of it on our property. And then it goes through a corner to make a state park. And then it runs onto and through the 800-acre Nature Conservancy parcel that's on the south end of Turkey Mountain. But on the north end, where we live, we kept it up for our own purposes with our own machinery for many years. And when the prior owner of the timberland on Turkey Mountain, it was Wagner Forests, did their last harvesting operation, they invested a lot of money in gravel and culverts and drainage so they could use it as a truck haul road to get timber out from their property through our property onto West Wyndham Road and from thence to market.
Charlie, hang on one second, I apologize, I should have led into this a little bit. We've kind of now transitioned a little bit. This road is underneath, or under the section of a pent road, so the suggestion, so
Yes.
you're giving a good overview of the trail itself, but it's not under the category of recommendation for discontinuance. It's under a new topic, or a new category.
That's correct. It's one of two that we recommend be authorized to be pented, and the select board prohibit the use of motor vehicles except for those owned or authorized by the adjoining landowners and others that have a right to use it to get access to their property.
And can you explain that too? I think a lot of people know what Pent Road is or have learned. But just for the record, to just define the Pent Road.
Okay, Pent Road is actually a very old strategy. It was used in Europe and it's used in the colonial United States and in Vermont in the old days when public roads ran through farmland, and it was convenient for the owner of the farmland to erect a fence and a gate across the road to keep his livestock in place, but it was also necessary for the general public to be able to get through those gates and, without letting the cows out, continue down the public road. So way back when, a number of roads in Jamaica were authorized to be pent, which means to put up a barway or an unlocked gate. And many years after the statute allowing the select board to authorize the penting of roads was enacted, provisions were added that allow select boards to regulate the use of motor vehicles basically on all roads, but also within pent roads.
Okay.
The reason that the Planning Commission does not recommend the discontinuance of LT 11 or LT 25, which is in South Wyndham, is that those public rights of way extend across private parcels, several different private parcels, and they provide access to public parcels. And if they were discontinued, the ownership and management responsibility for that right of way and access trail would revert to private individuals. Thus, the owners of land having a right to use those public rights of way to access their property would retain their private right to use it, but the town would lose the ability to keep it open for passage for things like, as Paul mentioned, firefighting purposes, and the town would lose the ability to manage, to allow the reasonable managed use of those trails for recreation. Walking, bike riding, horseback riding, those all occur on LT 10 and I presume on LT 25. Certainly people walk and sometimes ride bicycles, and I think an occasional horseback rider goes through LT 25. But the Planning Commission feels that for reasons that we stated in the description of the two trails, that it would be in the best interest of the town and the adjoining landowners that the town authorize the placement of barways or unlocked gates. And the select board can, without a public hearing, establish a regulation by passing a motion that is recorded in the town records prohibiting the use of motor vehicles except for those vehicles that are owned or authorized by the adjoining landowners and others having the right of access. And if that were done, it would give the adjoining owners the opportunity to meet and greet and reason with people who choose to take down the bars and drive past the sign and tear up the road anyway. We can go find them and say, you know, really, the sign says you can't do it. Please don't do it again. And if that's not effective, then we can refer the issue to the sheriff's department and ask the sheriffs to go talk to the individual. And, you know, the select board prohibits the use of vehicles on that road. Don't do it.
And so you would envision the select board is recommending not only painting these roads, but having those guidelines put in place for the use of motor vehicles on both these roads too?
Yes.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
That's in there.
Okay,
Yes.
I just don't
Clearly
remember.
stated in the
Read this week.
recommendation.
Right in the title. Okay.
What we recommend, we being now the planning commission, and I also, to some extent, speaking for myself, because I'm the owner of, my property contains part of LT 11, and my two sisters own property that contains much more of it. So we have a definite interest here. I don't have a legal conflict of interest to speak to this, but I want you all to know that that trail affects us very significantly. We've spent a lot of time and money keeping that trail from washing away, stabilizing the erosion, fixing the damage that's caused by people who insist on driving their vehicles on it when it's soft and muddy. And those folks don't stop and patch the ruts that they make. They just chew their way up, turn around, chew their way back down through again, leave nice ruts for us to try to rake out. And I used to own a dozer and a backhoe, so it was a little easier. I don't have the equipment anymore, getting too old to do it. So from my perspective, and I think this is shared by, the problem anyway, is shared by others who own land that is accessed by LT 11 and LT 25, is that the town has no legal responsibility to do any maintenance work on legal trails, and typically and traditionally, the select board has declined requests to do maintenance work. We just don't do it because that's why, for most purposes anyway, that's why the town made the decision to change the classification of those roads to legal trails, was to avoid the use of town funds to maintain the trails. But if they get torn up and the erosion isn't checked, then they get destroyed, which is what's happened to LT10. We, being the Peck family and the state of Vermont and the Nature Conservancy that own the northerly end of LT11, and the owners of LT25, including Luke, sitting behind me here, had the same feeling that it's our obligation and responsibility as adjoining landowners to keep the public asset from washing away, but we need, and we're asking for assistance from the town in using your authority to reasonably keep people from operating motor vehicles. We don't propose to prevent people from walking or bicycling or riding horses, but we do propose that people randomly driving their trucks up into the woods when the ground is muddy cause expensive damage.
Who would oppose us doing this?
The
How
people
would
that
they-
enjoy
the people who have their
roads.
Jeeps and go up there.
Right,
There's
but
a real
how would they oppose us? How would that come?
Come to a hearing and
Yeah,
raise
that's
an
not gonna
objection.
happen.
Right.
No, I'm not.
Well, it
being
wouldn't
smart,
on a
but
Penn Road,
that-
anyway, it wouldn't on a Penn Road,
No,
because there's not really a
the people that
hearing.
were opposed to it would just tell the select board, oh, I don't want you
I
to
don't
do
want
that
to."
because I have so much fun when I
No,
go
that's
pick
what
up
I'm
my
asking.
Jeep
Yeah,
and my
that's what it
cigarette.
would be. Someone coming to the select board meeting when it's on the agenda for action.
Okay.
And raising their objection.
What happens now, Andy, is that I know a couple of the people that are tearing up LT11, the one that goes through my property, my family's property. I know personally who they are, and I've talked to them and asked them reasonably not to do it, especially when it's muddy. And the answer I get is kind of sneering, like, well, it's a public road, and I got a right to do
That's
it,
right.
that's all, please.
Right.
I can't do anything, you know, except to say, yes, sir, you got a right to wreck what I need and what I own. You can wreck it.
Right. But it does come ultimately to our decision.
Yes.
To say yes or no or why.
Yes, the select board has the authority and the responsibility to manage motor vehicle use and to determine to what level the town should support or pay for the maintenance of our legal trails. They're public property, but when the town chooses not to spend any money to repair or maintain them, it's left up to us adjoining private landowners to do it at our expense. Otherwise, we know, even better than the select board usually knows, that it won't be there in 2 or 3 years if we don't keep patching it. If we let the erosion
Yeah,
go
it's great.
unchecked, the land will wash away down the brook.
It would be, I think it would be helpful when we kind of actually get to a point where we're taking some action. If there, I know that I've seen the maps. Can we maybe attach to this, Charlie, a little bit of, the section of the maps that shows each of these. It's just a little bit more visual.
I was trying to look online, I looked at some of the old time reports and was trying to figure out where all this stuff was, but those maps weren't that labeled.
Right, especially since.
But it doesn't say like LT10 or LT11.
Right. Since we're not going to be obligated to actually do a site visit or even consider a site visit, especially for those, just to see,
Well, you can do a site visit. I think we should talk a little bit about the issue of site visits. Logistically speaking, having the entire select board do a site visit is somewhat complex because you have to warn a special meeting of the select board if more than 3 of you.
We've done it before.
Yeah,
Well,
it makes sense.
You cannot do it legally, in my view and in the view of other town attorneys in the past. I don't know what Nick Lowe says about this, but I believe the law is clear. You cannot join together for the purpose of discussing any public business.
Oh, absolutely.
No, but we've done it.
warned
We
the
have
meeting
warned meetings for
a
site visits.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
I understand what you're talking about now. You can do it that way. Another way to do it is for any of you that have not seen any of these specific roads and want
Right,
to see
just
them,
go out.
just go and look at it, or contact me, and I'll be glad to meet with you and show you the road and talk about it and point stuff out and answer your questions about the road. And Tom, to what you were saying, the existing legal trails and town highways and all of the segments that are discussed in our report are on the V-Trans mileage map, which is up on the bulletin board here in the town office. It's also available online. I'll send you all a copy, a PDF copy of the V-Trans mileage maps.
That would be great.
It shows the numbers. They're also shown with their road names on the E911 address maps. I'll send you a PDF.
Okay.
I'll send to each member of the select board
That would be great.
a PDF copy of both of those maps for you to refer to.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie, that'd be great.
Yeah.
So Jessica, that point leads into the next, to our next steps kind of thing too. I mean, we could say, hey, we're gonna take some action on some of these things at our next meeting, or how do you envision this happening, Charlie? I know we talked about this a little bit, but I can't recall exactly that. I don't want it to, drag on, but I don't want to rush anybody either for gathering up an understanding of it, and getting the feedback that we're looking for.
Like, is there a priority, which of the roads that you're recommending, that the planning commission is recommending action on? Do you have an order in which you would want us to address it?
Or we could even say, hey, we're gonna convene at our
Do it
next
all
meeting,
at
and we're
once.
gonna talk about them all, and everybody
Right.
just come back with all your thoughts, and, or wait another month to say, give us time to, like 2 meetings basically, to give
Right.
us time to get out there and all gather.
It's gonna take a little, it's gonna take a little preparation for the action on the legal trail, to pent the legal trails and pass select board regulations prohibiting the use of motor vehicles. Can be done at any time you want to warn it. At one, you have to warn the action on the agenda. You don't have to send out public notice as you do for reclassification or discontinuance. So I think you could do those at any time. What is needed there is a carefully and correctly worded motion to be recorded in the town records indicating that you took the proper legal action in accordance with your statutory authority. And I can draft that motion, but I think that for the purposes, particularly for reclassification and discontinuance, but I think also for penting and prohibition of motor vehicle use, it would be best to have the motion reviewed and checked by the town attorney.
Agreed.
It's your choice, but I am not an attorney. And I cannot give you bona fide legal advice. And in this case, the stakes are fairly high, and my recommendation would be that Greg and I, if we get that far, Greg and I work on draft legal language, and then Greg forwards the draft to the town attorney for his review and further refinement if necessary.
That would be great.
Does that make
For
sense
one-
to all of you?
Yes, absolutely, to me, yes.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nick knows we're working on this, but he hasn't seen this document yet either, so that
Okay.
next step would be great to be able to get in front of him.
The reclassification and the discontinuance actions require a public hearing. It requires that all interested parties, that means all persons who own property that adjoins the road or trail segment in question, and others having a legal right of access to gain access to their property by way of that road segment or legal trail, must be given 30 days notice in advance by certified mail. I have a list of the abutting landowners and interested parties, but I was working from the online property maps, which are only current through the 2019 grand list. There are not very many interested parties. It's a fairly short list that have to receive certified notice, but we do need to ask Sarah, and possibly also to have the listers check to make sure that those parcel ownerships are still current, that they have not changed hands since 2019. Once we know who the current owners are today, then we need to send a certified notice to each of them, and also 15 days, that has to go out 30 days before your public hearing. And 15 days before the public hearing, you must publish the notice in 3 public places and in a newspaper general circulation. You're all familiar with that and with the horrifying cost of publishing the notice in the Brattleboro Reformer, which is it's a real eye-opener when we get that point, but we have to do it. I think that it's going to be necessary. My suggestion is that either tonight or at your next meeting, the board pass a simple motion just to authorize the chairperson, Greg, to work with me and with Sarah to gather the necessary information and propose a hearing date and create a formal motion in which the board will, Greg can read the motion and the board can then vote on it to take the legal action to call the public hearing and cause the notice to be sent to the interested parties. That begins the formal process. And I submit to you that the best way to do this is if you want to proceed, if the board wants to proceed on its own motion to consider these reclassifications and discontinuances that are recommended in our report, you have to hold a public hearing. You can't make the decision until after the hearing. You may learn things at the public hearing that might cause you to have a different opinion than you have today. So it's premature to make a decision about whether we're going to reclassify or discontinue. But if the board feels that the issue should be pursued, then you need to informally pass a motion authorizing Greg to take the necessary steps to schedule a public hearing and come back to you with a formal motion and a proposed date of the public hearing.
Can I make a motion?
So that motion would be made now to
Now.
have it prepared for the next meeting?
To
or
give you.
Yeah, right,
Right,
yeah.
Not necessarily for the next meeting,
Okay.
but as soon as we
Yeah,
can
okay.
reasonably get it done.
right. So,
Yeah.
shall I make a motion?
Well,
Is everybody okay for me to make a motion? Because then we can discuss.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Okay,
So I'd like to make a motion that this board authorizes Greg to work together with Charlie and the members of the Jamaica Planning Commission and Sarah as needed to gather the information necessary to propose a hearing date and to take all necessary and legal action to schedule that hearing date and to make a proposal for the reclassification and discontinuance of Hollow Road, Blake Road, the segment of Turkey Mountain Road on state land, and LT 10.
Second.
Any further discussion?
Yes, I don't want to burden the chair with, if this is like going too fast. I mean, is this something that's, can take a couple of months, or we just, has this been coming to a head, and now we're gonna deal with it right now?
No, it's not necessarily coming to a head, yeah, but I think it
I
has
just
been
don't
going
wanna
on for a
like
while.
burden you with
My
We
feeling.
got town meeting coming.
No,
up.
right, yeah, exactly. So my
Would it
thinking
take a
too
couple months
would
to-
be to make sure all of us are up to speed on it too. And that this was kind of, I mean, I feel like I've been
Right.
immersed in this a little bit more than everybody else has. So to get the rest of the board up to where I'm at with this. And
Right.
so I'm not seeing taking action on that proposal for the next meeting, but it might be for after town
Yeah,
meeting.
That's why I'm not specifying any kind of time.
Mid-April, come back.
It's really
with-
just letting,
Yeah.
it's that the board
Yeah.
supports you and is authorizing you to work together with the JPC
Yeah.
and to come back to the board with a proposal for a hearing scope,
And roughly come
and,
back
you know,
mid-April or so. And I appreciate that.
whenever that makes sense, right?
A lot going
Right.
on.
In addition to that, Jessica, what Greg would be coming back, and I would be working with Greg, and I think Greg would be in communication with Nick Lowe about the details of this, but Greg would come to the board at some unspecified future date, likely enough after town meeting, just because of the
Yeah.
the structure of the way the board works, we just aren't gonna have enough time.
Time.
So when the background work has been completed, Greg comes to the board with a written, formal motion that describes the proposed action, and that's something that you can vote on to initiate the formal proceeding. But you do need to do what you're doing now, which is to basically tell the chairperson of the board and all others that are gonna work on this behind the scenes that the board wants us to proceed to lay the groundwork and get ready for a future formal action by the board, at which you'll be voting on a written motion that describes what you're proposing to do.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, if anybody here now doesn't quite feel, and then this is, I mean, I know roads have been discontinued and changed and for years and years and years, but I mean, it's nothing that this board has done before, so.
Right.
There may be some desire to kind of even wait on taking action on that proposal until another meeting.
Well, once you have a formal motion in front of you, you can debate until you can't
Right.
stand it anymore about whether you dare to pass that motion at that
Right.
meeting.
We need
But
a motion.
you can't begin this process legally until you pass that formal motion. And you're not ready to do that now for sure. So what Jessica is proposing makes sense to me. And Andy, I don't feel that, I don't have in mind anything that's going to push Greg or the board to act too fast. In fact, I'm a strong advocate for doing it right, taking as long as we need to make sure that we get the action correct.
Well, that's exactly what I wanted to say, but,
Yeah.
you know, take our time a little.
Yeah, do it right is a huge, big part of this.
Not to like take forever, but, you
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Yeah.
Like, this is what, I read this and then hearing all this, it's a lot to
Let that
absorb.
digest, yeah.
At the hearing, someone could change my mind on one of these things in particular that I've already heard the other side of, but that's why we have hearings.
And I'm looking forward to seeing these particular roads. I know roughly where they are, but.
Right.
To get out.
Essentially, right, laying your eyes on it,
Yeah.
right?
If any of you have any questions about any of the issues that are raised in that report and recommendation, you're always welcome to email me or phone me. And if any of you want to go and look at any of these road segments, I've looked at all of them at one time or another. Particularly know an awful lot about LT11, LT10, and LT25, which is in Luke's front yard, but I spent a lot of time hiking on that particular one too, so.
You need snowshoes now.
You're all right with it, Greg.
I'm all right moving, I feel comfortable moving forward for sure, yep. And I don't know if we had a second on
No.
the,
Yes.
Yeah, Kate
Okay.
did.
We're
Yeah.
discussing it.
so we discussed, yeah. Yeah, and I would encourage too, I mean, even prior to this process, I mean, just being an outdoors person, I've walked all these roads too, so just to get out there and go look at them.
Yes,
Yeah,
agreed.
so motions on the table, any other discussion on this? So all in favor of adopting that motion as spelled out by Jessica? Say aye.
I
All abstaining. All, any opposed? One abstention, but I fully support it. Thank you.
I'm not going to ask you why you support it, but I'm staying voting for it, Greg, so. I didn't ask you, so don't.
Mr. Chair, you can do that.
I didn't ask you. What I will do next, what I will do next is to put together all the information I know about the parties that are entitled to legal notice on this, and then send it to you, Sarah, so that you can use your ingenious ways to figure out if the list is up to date and if the owners are, if the ownership has changed. And then, Greg, I will draft the language for the motion that is needed to begin the formal action and send that to you, and then whenever you get around to it, you can run it by Nick Lowe and his comment.
Right. I got time report.
Right. I'm gonna do that now.
Right, no
That's
pressure.
right by that.
Yes.
Busy time of year.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charlie.
Thank you, Charlie.
Thank the rest of the planning commission.
You're quite welcome. The Jamaica Planning Commission, I'm gonna stick my neck out a little bit. I'm not fully authorized to speak for the commission, but I know them well and I respect every one of them. And I think they agree with me on this point. We are grateful and respectful of the select board including us in this process and giving us the opportunity to, instead of blindsiding us with a last minute notice or no notice at all, giving us the opportunity to consider this issue and weigh in at the proper time. Thanks. It's a first for the town of Jamaica and we appreciate it.
Wow,
Okay.
all right.
Yes,
Just
Lucas.
a quick comment. I just wanted to
Sorry.
express my thanks to Charlie Peck and the
Yes.
Planning Commission and also the Select Board for thinking about these issues. I know these are hard issues to deal with.
Yeah,
And so we really appreciate you all working together.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you
down.
for coming.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
I'll be back to bother you again about some other important issue soon. I am actually working on that traffic ordinance.
Good,
Still,
good.
still sitting
Thank
there
you.
staring me in the face
Thank
every
you.
morning. Progress is
you.
being made,
Thank you.
Jessica.
Thank you. I
I
appreciate
figured
it.
one thing at a
We
time.
do have to get back to that.
Well, I figured we should proceed to get this started.
Well, the weather's gonna get good soon, and it's gonna be, it's gonna be time to do it.
People with
Well,
Exactly.
faster than you all want to deal with it, I'll
Yes.
give you a revised draft
Awesome.
and answer to some of the questions from the last time we talked about it.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay, we still have one.
Yeah, the transfer
couple of-
station.
Paul, see you later.
See you later. Yep.
Good
Good
evening.
night.
By the way, I did go out and find that map that he was talking about. It's right online. And then I went through again. It's not easy to find everything.
Okay,
Just
Tom.
out there. And I did actually find all the trails and stuff, just quickly while you guys can chit chat.
I'm gonna send it to you anyway,
Yeah,
again.
please do.
Okay,
Thank
you can send it to me anyway, that's fine. I just downloaded it, so.
And I know where they are. Someone wants to ask too, so.
Yeah, I mean, some of them I couldn't find, and then like the Rossville one, oh, there's Inlay or Inset, I had to find it, but yeah, I kind of just poked around and, yeah, okay, anyway, just letting you know.
All right, cool, thanks. So the next item 5, review and approve new transfer station rates. So kind of this has been a conversation with Dan and also Terry, seeing where we're at and what we're charging and where the rates have gone over the past few years and digging into this a little bit more. To our knowledge, this has not been updated, I think since 2009. So obviously, well, there probably has, I mean, some things have, because pay as you throw is new since 2009. So anyways, but to formally go through this whole thing,
And not to interrupt you.
Yeah, go ahead,
I'm
Noel.
interrupting you. At times, we made a change here or there.
right, absolutely,
But
yeah,
not anything like this.
right. And even now, to some extent, I mean, over the past year or so, the tire fees have gone up through the roof.
Yes.
I know the, things like things with Freon, like the freezers and refrigerators have gone up. So we've kind of moved up our pricing in line with what our costs were. But this, to me, just kind of came to a head and just said, hey, let's just run through them all at one point. This is it. I have, this is what we kind of come up with. Terry's got some input, has had input into it too, just on where our costs are. I believe that we probably should bring up our pay-as-you-throw rates just a little bit, but I don't know how much capacity people have for that right at this point. We don't have to do everything all at once. I think some of these other fees for appliances, tires, anything that's very, very much spelled out, is in line with what our costs are. it's somewhat hard to, you know, translate that $2 or $3 a bag into a per ton cost by just looking at our totals, so. I'll open up.
Do we want to make a motion and then?
Or,
Is there
Then
copies
open
of
for
this?
discussion?
We all have this?
I'm looking on my phone, sorry.
My big thing is, because I'm in the trade, is, you know, I might be-
Sarah's gonna print it
Okay.
out.
there's more.
I might be ticking off some other tradesmen, but if we need to up our demo rates, you know, like,
Oh, ooh, Andy, you're good.
well, I mean, I know, I can speak for some contractors that are willing to,
Yeah,
you know, we understand that,
right, if it's right.
you know, you don't ask us
But
to
it's funny.
sort out, to lay stuff in the
Right.
demo thing, and
But that
we
didn't
would
come
pay.
up. It didn't come, I don't know why, it didn't come up in the discussion with Terry, did it?
I think it's a deal, to be honest with you.
Right.
What the rate is for my truck level,
Yeah,
with
Yeah.
whatever can go in the
Right.
the demo bins
Right.
or dumpsters.
It's not, you know what it is? It's like if you go to towns like Londonderry, some of our neighboring towns, it's a much bigger issue just because it's that type of waste is
Right.
utilized. It's not, my recollection from Dan is that it's just not that big of an issue for us. So I'm not surprised he didn't raise it. Otherwise, it would have been on here, right?
What's the issue? Yes, I'm.
Well, I just think that the demo, well, if the contractor bags that go in the demo, they're going up, right?
Yes.
Yes,
That's gonna help.
yes, that will help.
That's
But
a
when you've
deal.
got a-
That's a good
right.
deal for whatever
Right.
Dan.
Thank
You know,
you.
sometimes he says 350, sometimes 4, depending how much it's
So,
packed. But $5 or whatever is,
right.
for me,
Yeah, so it was never on this form to begin with, but that's what he had been charging.
Well, it just says 1 ton dump truck level full.
right, but if
But
you
for
bring
the bags.
contractor bags for the demo, you know,
Right.
you can cram a lot of stuff in there.
Yes,
If
you
they're
can.
really packed,
You
it
can.
says another $1.
Right. It's still a big, but even with these increases for the trucks, it's still a deal. It is a deal. But that's why I would support it. But you're right.
Oh, I'm not out to cost any, but, you know, to.
Right.
And did Dan say something about we can bring like dump truck loads of tires to, what is it down in Brattleboro, are they taking tires?
Wyndham Solid Waste.
Wyndham Solid Waste.
Yeah, so that's changed a little bit. The contractor that had been, there's only 2, I think, in all of New England that were picking up tires. And so they're not doing
Oh,
it. So
they're
that's
not
why
doing it.
that's why the tires are kind of bursting at the seams up there. But it was all the towns were in the same boat.
Right.
So Wyndham Solid Waste said, how can we jump in and help our member towns, basically? So they built a facility to gather tires down there, and they've got a contractor that will come with a tractor trailer truck, basically, which they wouldn't go to the individual towns just because it wasn't enough tires.
Right, per
So
ton.
they're acting as a consolidator, basically, of the tires. So it's a fairly cost-effective way to do it, outside of the fact that we now have to get the tires there.
Right.
So I talked to Keith, or Terry talked to Keith about it, and it'll be something probably that we'll do during the off-season, so to speak, not when they're plowing, not when the sand's in the truck and all that kind of thing. They'll just take a couple of truckloads down there every month or so, and so this I anticipate will cover that cost. I mean, this is built as covering the existing contractor, but their rate per tire is less, so it's just a matter of factoring in Keith's time and trucking.
Plus, we've got like grader tires up there.
Yeah. I mean, those we technically have not listed here.
But they can go to Brattleboro?
They can go to the Brattleboro. They do
Okay.
have they do have another fee for it, or I don't remember what it is off the top of my head.
Do we need a motion to accept this?
Yeah, I would make a motion that the board accept the updated Town of Jamaica transfer station tipping fees.
I'll second.
Perfect. I guess we've already had our discussion.
We did.
Any further
Sorry about
discussion?
that.
No, that's fine.
But the bags staying the same, right? We kind of are in discussion.
We are in discussion, yes.
I don't think that'd be a good time to raise them, right?
That's kind of some
That
of
was
my
the
feeling
thinking.
too.
Things
Yeah.
aren't going so hot, if you haven't noticed.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody's mad
Yeah,
about
But,
right.
you
That's
know,
an
like-
everyday cost versus an exceptional
Townsend.
cost, so,
I
yeah.
noticed Townsend's at 350.
A couple of towns in the immediate area have bumped up just to
Higher.
like 50 cents or so.
Right.
I don't know what kind of feedback they're getting. Of course, everybody's gonna give
I
feedback.
think this is great.
All of these things I think will help. You know, we don't
Right.
necessarily have to
Terry
ratchet
felt it
them
would
all.
substantially get us closer to
Yeah.
our actual cost.
And we don't have to
without
ratchet up
actually having
everything
to
all
raise
at one
that.
time. I
Yeah.
mean, we could roll that out 6 months from now
Right.
or you know,
Oh.
kind of reevaluate it or whatever.
Okay.
I mean, I think that's still, I mean, I don't know, it's been that way for a long time. And our fees have gone up. It's not a matter of looking at the news and looking at inflation or whatever. It's a direct,
You're here.
it's directly what our fees are. I mean, it's supposed to be pay as you throw to cover our costs and we're not.
Okay.
So
So when we'll implement this sometime?
we haven't voted yet, but we can
Right.
implement it immediately. Actually, no, I did anticipate rolling it out. I mean, just from the education, just from the letting people know about it, that we would post it, we'd put it up at the transfer station, we'd set a date. I think
Right.
initially I said April 1st, or did I say that? Or
Should
did
I
I
put it
say?
in the town report?
That's a good point.
Can we
It
do
would
it?
be really helpful. just so you can keep
Yeah.
anything on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I know.
Just so then people would have it and they know the new
Yeah.
rates.
Just spending money
And they
on
were
it.
there. And then if
That's
it
all.
was started April 1st, town meeting's April 2nd, so they'll have gotten their town.
Yeah,
report.
yeah, that's a good
See
idea.
that.
And I don't know if there's enough room for all of this, but we can refer them to the website
Right.
or something
Yes.
like that.
I like that idea.
Yeah. Is April 1st a comfortable day, or do we go a little?
fine with
Yeah. All right, motion's on the table to accept the revised transfer station rates. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Okay, thank you. April 1. Cool. And the rest of the items on our list are to approve the town time sheets, and the pay orders, which we will do.
Make
Any
a motion to adjourn then, I guess.
public comment? No?
No.
Okay.
Good job.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Seconded? All in
Oh,
favor?
sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, thanks everyone.